Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Peppa's Spooky Halloween. It was Halloween and Peppa and George were at Granny and Grandpa Pig's house. Please can we only do spooky things today, Granny? Asked Peppa. Yes, of course, replied Granny Pig. Most definitely, added Grandpa Pig. Grandpa Pig loves Halloween. Shall we bake some spooky treats? Said Granny Pig. Yes, please, cheered Peppa and George. Don't these cakes look yummy? Said Grandpa Pig. They're not yummy, Grandpa, said Peppa. They're spooky. Oh, yes, very spooky, Grandpa grinned. Your house isn't very spooky, Grandpa, said Peppa. It isn't at the moment, said Grandpa Pig, showing Peppa a great big box. But let's see what we can do with these decorations. Wow, gasped Peppa. You have so many Halloween decorations. Yes, said Grandpa. We've collected a lot over the years. After they had made the house spooky, Peppa and George wanted to make themselves spooky too. They looked in Granny and Grandpa Pig's dressing up box. Monster! Roar! Shouted George, putting on a funny monster costume. Look at me! Hee hee! Cackled Peppa, who was dressed as a witch. I am the spooky vampire, said Grandpa Pig in his best vampire voice. Let's try on all the spooky costumes, cried Peppa excitedly. Mummy! Shouted George, dressing up as a mummy and falling over his bandages. Meow! Purred Peppa, looking just like a witch's cat. Tickle, tickle, said George, tickling Grandpa Pig with one of his 8 furry spider's legs. I'm rattling my bones, said Peppa, shaking her arms and legs in a skeleton costume. Dressing up in spooky costumes was lots of fun, especially when Peppa and George both dressed up as ghosts. Boo! Shouted Peppa, jumping in front of Granny Pig. Oh, you scared me, Ghost George, said Granny Pig. No, I'm Ghost Peppa, Granny. That's Ghost George over there, said Peppa, pointing and giggling. Peppa and George decided to change one more time. George liked the skeleton costume the best, but Peppa had something else in mind. Look at me, said Peppa. I'm a magical Halloween unicorn. Well, we can't have Halloween without a magical Halloween unicorn, can we? Laughed Grandpa Pig. Granny and Grandpa Pig gave Peppa and George a big round of applause. You're both so spooky, said Granny Pig. What spooky thing can we do next? Asked Peppa. Why don't you put on a spooky show? Suggested Grandpa Pig. Yes, cried Peppa. We can invite Mummy and Daddy and our friends to watch it. That sounds like a lots of fun, said Granny Pig. Spooky fun? Asked Peppa. Oh yes, of course, Peppa. Spooky fun, said Granny Pig, laughing. Later that afternoon, Mummy and Daddy Pig arrived at Granny and Grandpa Pig's house. Wow, Granny and Grandpa Pig have gone all out this year, said Mummy Pig as she knocked on the door. The door creaked open and there stood Grandpa Pig in his costume. Welcome to the spooky house, he said. I trust you have come to watch this evening's performance of the spooky show. Yes, replied Daddy Pig, a little confused. Once all their friends had arrived, "It's time for the spooky show," announced Peppa. "We hope you find it spooky," cried George. Everyone in the audience clapped and cheered excitedly. Peppa and George took it in turns to dress up in the spooky costumes, jump in front of the audience and shout, "Boo!" George was a monster, and a mummy, and a furry spider. And Peppa was a black cat, a ghost, a rattly skeleton, and a cackling witch. Hee 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 hee! "Ooh!" gasped their friends, giggling. "So spooky!" At the end of the show, Peppa and George jumped out in their favourite costumes. "I am the magical Halloween unicorn, and this is Skeleton George," Peppa cried. "We hope you enjoyed our show." Peppa and George bowed as the audience clapped. "Awoo!" cheered Danny Dog in his werewolf costume. "That was a fantastic show," said Vampire Grandpa Pig, patting Peppa and George on the back. "Well done." "Now then, everyone," said Granny Pig, "it's time for some spooky dancing." "Hooray!" Everybody cheered, jumping up to dance to the funny spooky music. "Did you have a fun day at Granny and Grandpa Pig's house?" Mummy Pig asked Peppa and George on their way home. "No, Mummy, it wasn't fun," replied Peppa. "It was spooktacular. Mwahaha!" Peppa and George love Halloween. Everyone loves Halloween. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that button and you can see all of my videos as soon as they're uploaded. This story is called Peppa's Magical Halloween. It was Halloween, and Peppa and George were dressed up in costumes, ready to go to the magical Halloween playgroup. "I'm the most magical witch, Daddy," said Peppa. "And George is a magical... what are you, George?" "Monster! Grrr!" said George. "Amazing," said Daddy Pig. "And very magical." Daddy Pig went to open the front door. "Wait, Daddy!" cried Peppa. "I can use magic to open the door." She pointed at the door and shouted, "Open!" But the door didn't open. "Oh," said Peppa, sighing. "I'm not magical." "I'm sure you are, Peppa," said Daddy Pig. "Maybe magical Halloween playgroup will help." "Yes!" cried Peppa. Peppa and George were very excited when they arrived at magical Halloween playgroup. Everyone was dressed in Halloween costumes, even Madame Gazelle. "Happy Halloween, children!" cried Madame Gazelle, smiling, "and welcome!" Halloween was Madame Gazelle's favourite day of the year. "Happy Halloween, Madame Gazelle!" everyone cheered. The children sat down and Madame Gazelle told them all about the magical activities they were going to do. "We will learn to fly on broomsticks, decorate magic wands, eat a Halloween feast, and then..." Madame Gazelle paused. "We will all cast a special magic spell together." "Hooray!" everyone cheered. Magical Halloween playgroup sounded brilliant. First, Madame Gazelle helped the children get their broomsticks ready for their flying lesson. Peppa decorated hers with flowers and rainbow ribbons. She even made a little seat for Teddy. "It's so pretty," said Peppa. "Ready to fly, Teddy?" Next, Madame Gazelle asked the children to grab their broomsticks and line up to go outside. "Hold on tight as we zoom on our brooms," she called, leading them on their flight. Peppa and her friends zoomed along, pretending to fly on their broomsticks. "Watch out for the bats! Now, duck under the branch!" cried Madame Gazelle. "Oh, it's a bit bumpy here. Let's slow down and wave to Mrs. Owl." "Whee! I love flying!" shouted Peppa. "It's so magical." "I love it too!" shouted Molly Mole. Then Madame Gazelle brought the craft tables outside so the children could make magic wands. "Ooh!" they cried. Madame Gazelle told everyone to pick a wand to decorate from the special box. "Don't forget to sprinkle on some fairy dust, children," she said. "We'll need it for our magic spell later." Once everyone had finished making their magic wands, it was time for the Halloween feast. There were bottles of colour-changing drinks, pretend potions in cauldrons, wobbly jelly bats, toffee apples, pumpkin cupcakes, and lots of witch hat-shaped sandwiches. "Delicious," said Mandy Mouse, tucking into a jelly bat. "Everything tastes yummy and magical," cried Peppa. When the feast was over, Madame Gazelle asked Peppa and her friends to form a circle, holding their magic wands. "Now, children," she began, "we have come to the most important activity of the day, casting a magic spell together." "Hooray!" everyone cheered. "To do this, we all need to take part, otherwise the spell won't work," said Madame Gazelle. First, the children needed to collect all the ingredients for the spell. Gerald Giraffe found a bag of adventure. Mandy Mouse found a bottle of kindness. Richard Rabbit found a pinch of politeness. George found a jar of giggles. And Peppa found a sprinkle of fun. Everyone added their magical ingredient to the big pot. Madame Gazelle stirred all the ingredients together. "Wonderful," she said. "Now, does anyone know some magic words?" Peppa put her hand up. "Please?" "That's an excellent magic word, Peppa," said Madame Gazelle. "We must include that. Any others?" The children shouted out lots of fantastic magic words. Abracadabra, swishity swish, wobbly bobbly. "Madame Gazelle," asked Peppa, "how does the spell work?" "There's a little bit of magic in every one of us," explained Madame Gazelle. "Now, repeat the magic words after me, and then wave your wands. Abracadabra, swishity swish, wobbly bobbly please." Abracadabra, swishity swish, wobbly bobbly please. Poof! Rainbow smoke filled the air, and when it cleared, the children saw their parents. They had appeared as if from nowhere. "Wow!" the children cried. "So magical!" "You see, we're all magical," said Madame Gazelle. "Yes!" cheered the children. Everyone said thank you to Madame Gazelle and then went home happily with their magical wands and broomsticks. When Peppa and George got to their front door, Daddy Pig wanted to test out his magic. He asked Peppa if he could borrow her wand. Then he pointed it at the front door and said, "Open!" But nothing happened. "Let me try," said Peppa. She held her wand up and tapped it on the door. Tap, tap. Then she said, "Open, please." And the door opened. Mummy Pig was waiting inside. "Don't worry, Daddy," said Peppa. "There is a little bit of magic in all of us. Maybe yours just doesn't open doors." "I think Daddy Pig just forgot to say the magic word," said Mummy Pig. Peppa and George giggled. Hee hee. Peppa loves Magical Halloween Playgroup. Everyone loves Magical Halloween Playgroup. Read Peppa's Happy Halloween. It is Halloween and Peppa and her friends are at playgroup. "Welcome to my Halloween Pick a Treat," says Madame Gazelle in a spooky voice. "Ooh," gasped the children. "What's that?" "I've set up some Halloween games and crafts for you," says Madame Gazelle. "After each one, you may pick a treat." Outside, Madame Gazelle hands the children pumpkin buckets to collect their treats in. "This is going to be the best Halloween ever," cheers Peppa. As the children reach the playground, they are amazed. It is filled with Halloween stalls and decorations. At the first stall, Peppa and her friends have to guess who is hiding in the spooky costumes. "Guess boo," says a voice from under a sheet. "Daddy," says Peppa, "I can see your glasses." "Guess boo," says another ghost. "Daddy," says Gerald Giraffe, "I can see your arms." "Well done, everyone," says Daddy Pig. "You can pick a treat." The next stall has a game called mummy wrapping. "Who can wrap their mummy like a mummy?" says Miss Rabbit. "Ready, steady, go!" Peppa and Susie Sheep race to see who can finish wrapping their mummy in bandages first. It's lots of fun. "Now pick a treat," says Miss Rabbit. Next, the children make some funny monsters. "Hee, my monster is looking at me," says Peppa, "with all 4 eyes." "What a marvellous monster," cries Grandpa Pig. "Would you like to pick a treat, Peppa?" asks Granny Pig. "Yes, please," says Peppa. Grampy Rabbit is running the magical broomstick stall. The children take turns to ride up and down on the broomstick. "I am flying on my broom," sings Peppa, "all the way to the moon." "Great flying, Peppa," says Grampy Rabbit. "It's time to pick a treat." The children have lots of spooky fun collecting all their treats. When they have tried everything, they run up to Madame Gazelle together. "It's your turn, Madame Gazelle," says Peppa, holding out her pumpkin bucket. "What do I do?" asks Madame Gazelle. "Pick a treat," cry Peppa and her friends. Then they each give one of their treats to Madame Gazelle. "That's very kind of you, thank you," says Madame Gazelle. "Happy Halloween." "Thank you," says Peppa. "This Halloween was best Halloween ever," cheer all the playgroup friends. And that's the end of the video. Make sure you subscribe and check out my Peppa playlists for more videos. Thanks, bye!